rush of protesters at Toronto City Hall. Anger over the outcome of the U.S. presidential election prompted a demonstration at Nathan Phillips Square, but that did not sit well with those who support Donald Trump.
It is the second straight weekend of protests against the American election. Demonstrators say they wanted to stand in solidarity with the people in the U.S. who oppose Trump's policies. Our Scott Lightfoot is outside Trump Tower on Bay and Adelaide Street, where the demonstration ended. Scott, we saw a scuffle between two groups. Did anyone get hurt?
No injuries, but one arrest. Police telling CTV News that one man has been charged with assault after that altercation. We saw a very passionate display this afternoon by a large group of people who do not support the next president of the United States and a smaller group that does. On a cold, rainy Saturday afternoon, hundreds filled the street.
I'm worried. I'm worried for everybody. I'm worried for the world, not just for America.
Raising their voices and their signs to show opposition to the president-elect of the United States.
I'm mad about a lot of things, starting with the wall, then the Islamophobia, then the misogyny, and just the lies and the contradiction. I didn't even know where to start with a sign.
Protesters gathered at City Hall before marching to the Trump International Hotel and Tower, where they chanted and sang. And some even posed for wedding photos.
Well, most of those who turned out today are Canadian. There are a number of Americans in this crowd saying they're very concerned about what is going on in their home country.
We can't let our country devolve into this, populist racism, sexism, discrimination against people who are different from, white America.
More than 10 days after the election, and some still cannot believe the results.
Deep, deep disappointment. I want to say I was surprised, but that was mixed with just kind of a sense of being resigned to a very sad outcome.
At least one American here says the outcome has motivated them to seek Canadian citizenship.
I want to become Canadian because I feel like Canada represents my values more than the U.S. does right now. I'm a little scared of the social unrest and worsening tensions between minority Americans.
There were those who showed up to support Trump, too. This group did not want to speak on camera. This group got into a confrontation which turned into a scuffle, which led to at least one person being removed by police. And this man said he simply came to have a dialogue.
To find connections with people as opposed to just having arguments.
Those on both sides say they'll continue to stay active.
The conversation doesn't stop at the border.
And keep having their voices heard.
And I can tell you that after that scuffle, we saw the police presence down here increased. We saw mounted officers on horseback arrive. They were not needed. The protest ended without any further altercations. Reporting live on Adelaide, I'm Scott Lightfoot. Austin, back to you.
Torontonians took to the streets today to protest the presidency of Donald Trump. Protesters say they marched to demonstrate against Trump's controversial campaign rhetoric.
Hundreds of people turned out in the rain and chilly temps, many of whom said they had never done anything like this before.
It's my very first protest, and as I'm getting older in life, I just felt that it was very important to speak out as an individual against evil. I'm not very political. I just think Donald Trump represents the worst in humanity.
We are the 99%! They chanted slogans like, "We are the 99%," and "Gay rights are human rights." They carried signs with messages like "Dump Trump." Many people say they're afraid for the future, especially on behalf of women and minorities.
When Donald Trump was elected, the air kind of changed. I know my mom, she even called me the next morning and she just said, I feel scared walking down the street now because Donald Trump being elected has just kind of made bigotry and racism and xenophobia and sexism just allowed.
The protest started out small at Nathan Phillips Square and then moved to the Trump Tower at Bay and Adelaide. where there was a strong police presence. Some of the messages were not just against Trump, but directed to Canadians, urging Canada not to be complacent.
We have a very inclusive and tolerant society, and we don't want that to change. You got to say right away, whatever's happening in the States, that's not acceptable here. We're not going to tolerate it from the get-go.
Some wondered if protests like this would do any good at all, but expressed the hope that those in positions of power, politicians and lawmakers, are listening and agree that Donald Trump's values are not Canadian values.
I'm concerned that Donald Trump's winning as president has legitimized a lot of the negative things that we can see here. I'm worried about what could happen to my country, and I wanted to send a message, not here, not on my watch.
One person at the rally was arrested for assault. No one else was detained, and there were no injuries.
That rain and those cold temperatures certainly did not dissuade some Torontonians who gathered today to denounce President-elect Donald Trump. But they weren't the only ones that came out. Supporters of the incoming commander-in-chief were also on hand to express their happiness about the election. Here's Ashley Molnar with more on the electoral vote.
Donald Trump has got to go.
They came together by the hundreds with one clear message.
This hateful rhetoric employed by Donald Trump in his campaign, these tones of misogyny, homophobia, sexism, racism, kind of are not acceptable here in Canadian culture.
For the second time within a week, anti-Trump supporters in Toronto are once again standing in solidarity with Americans, protesting the new president-elect and Donald Trump's policies.
My family in the States are considering leaving and coming back here.
This was not a democratic election.
Toronto MPP Sherry DeNovo joining protesters says Canadians need to be concerned, going on to say this about the new leader of our neighboring country.
So it's really important for those that we send to political office to say no. No to Trump, no to the values he stands for. We're going to out-Trump Trump with our own good values.
Of course, not everyone at Nathan Phillips Square was anti-Trump. Behind the crowd, a small group of pro-Trump demonstrators are also speaking out.
He was elected by the American people and the electors. Therefore, whether people like it or not, he is the president, and we'll have to just give him a chance.
Trump's the one who's going to put the American workers first.
You bunch of tyrants, you bunch of communists.
What started as a peaceful protest soon turned ugly when the two sides came face to face.
Nazis scum off our streets.
Police intervening, then escorted demonstrators making their way down Bay to the Trump Tower. About a dozen police officers and security barricaded the building as the crowds chanted on. Now, nearly 2 weeks since the election, it's not clear how much longer these demonstrations will go on. But so far in Toronto, it appears these protests are still growing. Ashley Molnar, Global News.
And here in Toronto, hundreds came out as part of an anti-racism rally. The event was hosted by the newly formed East End Anti-Racism Collective, and it comes after several white supremacist posters were put up around Stan Wadlow Park. The gathering was meant to help bring citizens together.
Today is about mobilizing as a community to send a message that hatred and racism are not part of East York.
Well, I do think that the American election has emboldened some of the extreme right voices in the United States, and I think it's important for us to say we're not going to let that happen here. And that's what is so incredible about this gathering. These people are saying the same thing. We don't want a community that speaks hate and division. We want, and we have, a community that is inclusive and welcoming, and we want to keep it that way.